The air in the grand ballroom was thick, not with perfume and laughter, but with the suffocating weight of my impending doom. Every shimmering gown, every polished smile felt like a judgment, pinning me to the floor. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a trapped bird desperate for flight. I was Princess Callista of Eldoria, and tonight was my mating ball. My 21st birthday, the night I was legally obligated to choose a mate, or rather, be chosen. My eyes darted across the sea of faces, searching for anything but him. Alpha Theron. His pack, the Iron Fangs, were brutal, renowned for their ferocity and unforgiving nature. And Theron, he embodied it all. His smile was a sneer. His eyes held a cruel glint that promised anything but tenderness. He was powerful, yes, but repulsive. A shudder, cold and deep, ran through me every time he looked my way, his gaze possessive, already claiming. My father, King Oberon, had arranged this match. A political alliance, he'd called it, to strengthen our borders against the encroaching northern Fae. My feelings, my future, my very essence were secondary, sacrificed on the altar of diplomacy. Smile, Callista, my mother, Queen Isolde, whispered, her voice tight, a mirror of my own unspoken terror. He is watching. I forced a brittle smile, feeling it crack at the edges. Theron stood across the room, a hulking shadow amidst the dazzling light. His eyes, dark as a winter night, met mine, and a slow, triumphant smirk spread across his face. He knew I was trapped. He knew I had no choice. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed its way up my throat. This wasn't just about mating. It was about survival. My spirit would shrivel and die under his harsh rule. I would be a trophy, a means to an end, a breeding mare for his lineage. The thought was a chokehold, stealing my breath. No, I couldn't. I wouldn't. My gaze swept the room again, frantic, desperate. Guards, nobles, foreign dignitaries, all blurred into an oppressive wall. Then my eyes snagged on him. He stood by the far archway. A guard, I presumed, from one of the neighboring territories. Tall, broad-shouldered, cloaked in a dark, simple uniform that somehow made him stand out from the glittering crowd. His posture was relaxed, yet alert, a quiet power thrumming beneath his stillness. His face was partially obscured by the shadows, but I could make out a strong jawline, a straight nose, and eyes. Oh, his eyes. Even from across the room, they felt like a jolt. A startling shade of emerald green, intense and fathomless, watching the proceedings with an unnerving calm. A stark contrast to the predatory glint in Theron's. He wasn't looking at me, not directly. He seemed to be observing the room, his gaze detached, almost bored. An outsider, an escape. A wild, reckless idea sparked in my mind, a desperate flame in the engulfing darkness. It was insane, utterly, irrevocably insane. But what did I have to lose? My life was already forfeit. My legs moved before my mind could catch up, carrying me through the throngs of people, a living ghost moving amongst the jubilant. Theron's eyes followed my trajectory, his smirk faltering as I veered away from him, away from my fate. My mother's whispered warning became a distant hum. I reached the archway, my breath catching in my throat. He turned his head then, those startling green eyes locking onto mine, a flicker of surprise. Then something else, recognition? A question? His scent hit me, then a deep, earthy aroma of pine and rain-soaked earth, utterly intoxicating, grounding me even as my world spun. It was nothing like the acrid, metallic tang of Theron's scent. This was comfort, safety. My heart was thundering. This was it, my one chance. Please, I whispered, my voice raw, barely audible above the din, my hand reaching out, trembling, to grasp the rough fabric of his uniform sleeve. "Help me." His gaze was unwavering, piercing, as if he could see into the darkest corners of my soul. A tremor ran through his powerful frame, subtle, almost imperceptible. He didn't pull away. He didn't speak. I can't marry him." I pleaded, the words tumbling out, desperate. "I won't." My eyes darted back to Theron, who was now moving, his face a thundercloud of rage. He was coming for me. There was no time for words. No time for explanations. Just instinct. Just a fleeting, desperate hope. With a surge of adrenaline, I rose on the tips of my toes, pulling his head down, and pressed my lips against his. A kiss born of sheer, unadulterated desperation. It was meant to be a defiant act, a public rejection of my betrothed, a plea for intervention from this stranger, whose presence offered a strange solace. His lips were firm, cool, then surprisingly soft. For a single, fleeting moment, the world dissolved. The music, the crowd, Theron's impending wrath, all faded into a soft hum. There was only the electric jolt of his touch, the dizzying scent of him, and the desperate, illogical hope blooming in my chest. It wasn't a lover's kiss, but a claim. A desperate, defiant claim. His body stiffened beneath my touch. A low growl, deep and primal, vibrated against my lips, not of anger. His arms, strong and possessive, wrapped around my waist, pulling me impossibly close, pressing me against his solid form. The kiss deepened. A swift, fierce plunge that stole my breath, a response that was far more intense than I had anticipated. It was a brand, a seal, a moment that would forever alter the course of my life. Then he broke the kiss, his eyes, those captivating green eyes, blazing with an intensity that took my breath away. They held a raw power, a predatory gleam, utterly unlike anything I had ever seen. And in that moment, I realized my mistake. This was no mere guard. This was something far, far more dangerous. But it was too late. The words were already echoing through the silent, stunned ballroom. "She is claimed." A single voice, powerful and resonating, cut through the sudden silence. Not his voice. A different one. One I knew. My blood ran cold. I turned slowly, my heart in my throat, to see King Alaric, the fearsome alpha king of the Midnight Pack, standing on the dais, his face a mask of furious disbelief, his emerald eyes, identical to the stranger's, narrowed, fixed on him. My blood froze. The king's twin. What have I done? That was quite an entrance. Where are you all watching from tonight? Let me know in the comments below. Chapter 1. The silence that fell over the grand ballroom was heavier than any roar. It wasn't the natural pause of music ending. It was a sudden, violent vacuum, broken only by the sharp, enraged snarl that ripped from the throat of Alpha Theron. My eyes were glued to the dais, where King Alaric, the Alpha King of the Midnight Pack, stood. His jaw was clenched, his emerald eyes, the same startling shade as the man still holding me, were sharp with fury. He was the most powerful werewolf in the unified territories, a man who ruled with a hand of iron and a legendary temper. And I had just provoked him by claiming his twin. Speaking of my claim, my hand still rested on the chest of the stranger, Cassian. He hadn't moved. His embrace remained steel-tight, his scent of pine and earth intoxicatingly strong. He was breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling beneath my palms, but he showed no sign of releasing me. I could feel the low, primal thrumming of his heartbeat against my ear. Or was that my own blood rushing? "You dare, Theron?" King Alaric's voice was dangerously low, amplified by the cavernous ballroom. He wasn't addressing me or Cassian. He was addressing the enraged Alpha charging toward us. Theron stopped 5 feet away, his fists clenching so hard his knuckles turned white. His nostrils flared, trying to inhale Cassian's scent. He didn't recognize it as royal, which was the point of the disguise, but the deep, raw intensity of the true alpha that Cassian was disguised or not was obvious. Theron's sheer rage was palpable, shaking the air. "This is an insult," Theron bellowed, his voice cracking with humiliation. "The princess was promised. She cannot simply choose a hired guard." He spat the last words like venom, his eyes raking over Cassian's simple, dark uniform. My heart seized. It wasn't just my life I had risked. I had put this man, this stranger, in mortal danger. I made my choice. I heard myself declare, the sound surprisingly strong, driven by desperation. I tightened my grip on Cassian's jacket, forcing myself to look Theron in the eye. I chose him. "You may be powerful, Theron, but the royal charter grants the princess unalienable choice at the mating ball. The choice, once made, is final." It was the only piece of lore I had clung to for the last year. A choice was a choice. A claim was a claim. Theron looked from me to Cassian, his gaze settling on my wrist, which was still firmly pinned against Cassian's chest. "You think a kiss is a claim? A contract of alliance cannot be dissolved by a whim, especially not for a nameless foreign dog." Before I could defend my choice, before King Alaric could descend from the dais, Cassian moved. He didn't release me. Instead, his powerful arm swept up, his hand cupping the back of my head, holding me firmly but gently against his shoulder. He took a slow, deep breath, smelling my hair, my skin, the fear and the defiant adrenaline that clung to me. Then his head tilted, and his teeth grazed the sensitive junction where my neck met my shoulder. It was a feathery touch, not a bite, but it sent 1,000 volts of electricity through my body. It was enough. A collective gasp swept through the room. That action wasn't a desperate kiss. It was the alpha's mark of possession. It was the true, undeniable seal of a claim. It was an action that could only be challenged by death. "She is mine." Cassian's voice vibrated, a low, dangerous rumble that was barely above a whisper, yet it cut through the thick silence of the ballroom, reaching every corner. His voice wasn't the polished tone of a royal. It was raw, gravelly, and laced with the primal authority of a true alpha. Theron staggered backward, his eyes wide, his rage momentarily replaced by stunned terror. Cassian's voice held the weight of mountains, the undisputed right of ownership. Theron, despite his power, had just been put in his place. Then Cassian finally released me, his hands falling to his sides. He turned, his entire posture changing from a protective stance to one of quiet, rigid deference. He finally acknowledged the man on the dais. King Alaric descended, his heavy cloak swishing against the marble floor. He didn't look at Theron. He looked only at his twin. The resemblance was terrifyingly complete. The same height, the same regal bearing, the same piercing green eyes. Yet Alaric's expression was that of a betrayed king, while Cassian's was the stoic calm of a loyal guard who had just made an irreversible mistake. Alaric stopped inches from Cassian. The air crackled between the twins, a silent war of authority and obedience. "You," Alaric enunciated, the single word a lethal promise. "You, who swore to simply observe the proceedings. You, who swore to avoid any involvement. You were my fail-safe, the unattached party who could judge the legality of the alliances." Alaric's voice dropped, venomous. "And you allowed yourself to be claimed by a princess seeking to escape a political arrangement." Cassian didn't flinch. He didn't deny it. "I did not allow it, Your Majesty," he responded, his voice still low, but respectful. "I was claimed. Once the charter is invoked, even a king's brother cannot refuse the right of a princess." King's brother. The words echoed in the stunned ballroom. Gasps erupted everywhere. The quiet, nameless guard was Cassian, the infamous, elusive twin of the Alpha King. Alaric closed his eyes, taking a deep, shuddering breath. When he opened them, the cold resolve was back. He knew the law. Cassian was right. The claim was valid. He looked at me, then, his gaze heavy and judging. "Princess Callista," he said, his voice flat, "you just gambled your entire kingdom and my brother's life on a desperate moment of rebellion. You are now tied to the man who holds the second most powerful claim to the throne. Do you understand the sheer magnitude of the political fallout you have caused?" I couldn't speak. All I could do was stare at Cassian, who refused to meet my eyes, maintaining that rigid pose of deference. He was not a guard. He was a prince, a twin, an alpha, and I had pulled him down into my desperation. My father, King Oberon, finally found his voice, sputtering from the dais. "Alaric, this is preposterous. The contract with Theron is ironclad. The alliance is vital. You must nullify this farce immediately." Alaric turned back to his father-in-law, his expression grim. "I cannot, King Oberon. Cassian is the only man in this hall who holds a rank that automatically supersedes Theron's contract. The claim is irrevocable." He then fixed his icy gaze on Theron. "Theron, you will concede. The princess has made her choice. Leave the hall. Now." Theron's face was a study in pure, unadulterated hatred. He didn't dare challenge the Alpha King. Instead, his eyes, burning with fire, locked onto mine. His lips curled back in a silent, terrifying promise. "She may be claimed now, King Alaric," Theron sneered, "but she chose the wrong man to save her. I will not forget this humiliation. You and your new mate will regret this night." With one last venomous look, Theron spun on his heel and stalked out, his powerful form vanishing through the doors, taking the immediate physical threat with him. The hall slowly began to breathe again. But the real danger hadn't left. It was standing right here, King Alaric's side, the weight of the crown settling back on his shoulders. "Cassian, take your mate and go. This situation requires a secure, private room and an hour of my undivided rage. You are under my personal protection, Callista, until this matter is settled, which means you are also under my direct jurisdiction. Do not speak to anyone. Do not leave the keep. Do not breathe without my permission." He looked at Cassian. "You will confine her to your chambers in the North Tower. Guard her. And understand this, brother, if she is harmed, or if she disappears, the fate of our kingdoms will be the least of your concerns." Cassian finally looked at me. His emerald eyes were complex, holding exhaustion, regret, and a terrifying depth of ownership. He didn't offer his hand. He simply turned his back to Alaric, bowed his head to the king, and started walking toward the nearest exit. He expected me to follow. I was his now. I felt dizzy, the floor swaying beneath my feet. I had escaped the clutches of a brute, only to find myself claimed by a prince who looked upon me with the coldness of a duty. I had wanted freedom. I had bought myself a cage of gilded royal iron. Did he hate me for what I had done? Was this contempt or simple obedience to his brother? I didn't know, but as I followed him, heart heavy with a terrifying new reality, I knew one thing: I had just mated a man who had no desire for me. The political stakes were higher than ever, and I was entirely alone. Chapter 2. The walk from the grand ballroom to the North Tower of the Midnight Keep felt like a procession to my own execution. The castle was immense, dark stone contrasting sharply with the rich banners and tapestries lining the halls. Every servant, every guard, every passing noble we encountered paused, their eyes wide with scandal, fixed on the Princess of Eldoria and the king's infamous twin. Cassian walked ahead of me, his steps long, silent, and purposeful. He never once looked back. His rigid posture was a shield, his silence a wall I couldn't breach. I, the princess who had gambled everything for freedom, was now forced to follow the cold, unyielding man I had accidentally claimed. My heart a heavy, sinking stone in my chest. My fear of Alpha Theron was a harsh, immediate terror, but this feeling, this sense of utter, profound regret and isolation with Cassian, was a slow, creeping dread. What had I truly bought with that impulsive kiss? Cassian, I finally managed to gasp, struggling to keep up with his pace as we ascended a winding, cold stone staircase. Slow down, please. He didn't slow. He didn't even twitch. It was as if I were speaking to a ghost, a beautifully rendered man of stone. I know you're angry, I continued, my voice trembling, raw with exhaustion and mounting panic. And you have every right to be. But I need to know what happens now. Is this truly irrevocable? The claim? Do you hate me so much that you won't even speak to me? That last question, born of sheer desperation, finally struck a nerve. Cassian paused on the landing, his shadow falling long and ominous against the wall. His shoulders were tense, tight, with a restraint that felt dangerously close to snapping. He turned, and the fury in his emerald eyes was a physical blow. It was a cold, pure rage, entirely devoid of the heat and lust I had expected from an alpha. It was the anger of a deeply honorable man whose life had just been violently upended. Speak to you, princess? His voice was a low, rough rasp, utterly devoid of the commanding rumble he had used to silence Theron. He used the formal title, emphasizing the chasm between us. What is there to say? You, in your desperate, selfish flight from a predictable fate, have just undone 3 years of cautious diplomacy and peace treaties for 2 kingdoms. He took a step closer, and I instinctively backed against the cold stone of the wall. His scent, which had seemed like safety in the ballroom, now felt overwhelming, intoxicatingly dangerous. You believe you are the only one who sacrifices for the greater good. Cassian continued, his eyes burning into mine. My brother kept me hidden as a simple guard, so that, when the inevitable mating ball passed, I could remain the king's one unattached leverage. The insurance policy. If war truly came, I was the one meant to ride north and negotiate the ceasefire. A powerful alpha, unbonded, with no political claim to compromise my neutrality. He leaned in, his face inches from mine, and I felt the heat radiating off him. Now, I am irrevocably mated to the daughter of the Eldorian king. I have no neutrality. I have a political claim to your throne. War is no longer a possibility. Princess, it is an inevitability you have personally guaranteed. The words struck me like stones. My desperation, my singular focus on my own freedom, hadn't just ruined my life. It had endangered thousands. I didn't know you were the twin. I whispered, shame washing over me. I didn't know you were a prince. Cassian let out a short, humorless laugh. Of course not. You saw a quiet face, a strong shoulder, and an easy mark, a simple shield to hide behind. His gaze dropped to my neck, to the spot where his teeth had marked me. You used the deepest, most sacred law of our people, the right of claim, as a political tool to save your own skin. He straightened, pulling away, putting the necessary distance between us. No, princess, I don't hate you. Hatred requires passion. I feel only a profound weariness and the heavy burden of duty. You are my mate now, my burden, and my responsibility. The claim is absolute, and I will honor it. But do not mistake that honor for affection. He turned and continued his ascent, leaving me trembling, staring at the empty space where he had stood. The truth hurt more than any lie he could have told. The North Tower chamber was vast and cold, fitting for a prince's emergency residence. It was sparsely furnished, dominated by a large hearth that held only dead ashes and a grand, canopied bed that seemed to swallow the light. It felt less like a bedroom and more like a fortress. Cassian entered and went immediately to the single window, its glass panels thick and reinforced. He stood there, a solitary silhouette against the bruised, midnight sky, his silence once again deafening. I moved to the center of the room, folding my arms tightly across my chest, trying to regulate my ragged breathing. "What about the annulment?" I asked, finally breaking the silence. "King Alaric is furious. He could override this. He could dissolve the claim." Cassian's back remained to me, but I saw his powerful shoulders tense. Alaric would not break the law of the claim for a political alliance, even this one. It would show weakness. It would invalidate every other claim made tonight. It would incite a civil war among the Pacts. He finally turned, his green eyes dark and unreadable. "No, Princess. There is only one way to dissolve a royal mate claim." My throat felt dry. "How?" "By the oath of the Blood Wolf," he stated simply, "and that requires both parties to willingly renounce the claim before the full moon in the presence of the clan elders. Given that my twin brother is attempting to broker peace, not chaos, he will not allow that. He needs me tied to you now, as proof to your father that the alliance is permanent." He walked to the heavy oak door and slid a thick, iron bolt across it. The echoing thud sealed the room, sealing us both in this gilded prison. He said I am under his protection. I whispered, trying to make sense of the sudden shift from freedom to confinement. "You are," Cassian confirmed, walking to the foot of the bed and retrieving a simple, worn leather satchel. He tossed it onto the dark stone floor. "And I am your protector, as per his decree. The North Tower is the most secure place in the keep. No one can reach you. Not Theron, not your father, not the political machinations of the court." He looked at me, his gaze piercing. "However, you are also my prisoner. You are not to leave this room. I am your jailer, Princess, and I am utterly unforgiving of disobedience." He unclipped the heavy, dark uniform jacket he was wearing and tossed it onto a nearby chair, revealing a simple, thick linen shirt. His arms, muscled, powerful, and covered in intricate, stylized black tattoos that spoke of ancient rituals and oaths, were magnificent. The power he had displayed against Theron was no fluke. He retrieved a thick woolen blanket from the wardrobe and went back to the hearth. Kneeling down, he began to methodically lay fresh kindling and light the fire. The first flicker of warmth and light seemed to push back the oppressive cold of the room. "He's going to sleep by the fire?" My cheeks heated with sudden, unwanted shame. Was he so repulsed by me that he couldn't bear the thought of sharing the bed? Where will you sleep?" I asked, indicating the sprawling, empty bed. Cassian didn't look up, his attention focused on coaxing the fire to life. "I will sleep where I can guard you best. The hearth is fine. I do not require luxury. Princess." The dismissal was final. It was more than a rejection. It was an emotional erasure. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the mattress soft beneath me, but offering no comfort. I watched him. He was systematic, efficient, and utterly controlled. The fire began to roar, chasing the chill from the stone. "I have ruined everything, haven't I?" I asked, the words barely a breath. Cassian finally sat back on his heels, stretching his long legs out, resting his back against the stone wall. He looked at the flames, not at me. "Yes, Callista," he said, using my name for the first time without a title. The sound was soft, rough, and intimate, despite the cold tone. "You have ruined everything, but you have done so spectacularly. You have exchanged a predictable doom for an unpredictable chaos." He glanced at me then, his green eyes holding a flicker of something I couldn't decipher. not hate, not desire, but a profound, complicated burden. Now, he said, his voice dropping to that dangerous alpha rumble, I suggest you sleep. You will need your rest. Tomorrow, you will face the King's Council, and they will try to break you. And I will be sitting right next to you, guarding my investment. Do not disappoint me. He closed his eyes, his breathing evening out immediately, a man capable of finding peace in a storm. He was awake, I knew, but he was done speaking. I lay in the giant, empty bed, the heat of the fire doing nothing to warm the sudden coldness in my soul. I was claimed, protected, and utterly alone, mated to a man who saw me only as a disastrous political complication. He had saved my body from Theron, but my heart was now trapped in his cold, silent grip. Chapter 3. The night in the North Tower was not one of rest, but of hypervigilance. I lay rigid in the vast, cold bed, the silence of the fortress broken only by the crackle of the fire and the deep, steady rhythm of Cassian's breathing near the hearth. He remained a still, dark silhouette, an impenetrable shield of muscle and control. I wanted to hate him for his cold dismissal, for treating me like a political pawn. Yet, every time my gaze drifted to his form, I remembered the sheer terror of Theron and the primal protective rumble Cassian had emitted when he marked me. That moment of true possession, brief and accidental as it was, had been the single bravest act of my life. Did he feel nothing from the claim? Our kind are taught that the mating claim, especially when sealed by the Alpha's mark, is instantaneous and life-altering. It forges a bond of mind, body, and spirit. Yet here he was, sleeping soundly by the ashes, radiating nothing but duty and disdain. A restless ache settled deep in my bones, a tension that had nothing to do with the day's trauma. It felt like a low-grade fever, a tingling sensitivity in my skin that made the rough wool of the blankets feel unbearable. It was a strange, unsettling energy that whispered of restlessness and an intense, irrational need. I knew, deep down, that this was the claim. Even if Cassian was consciously rejecting me, the primal magic of the bond was beginning to work its subtle, terrifying influence on my body. It was a tether pulling my emotions and instincts toward the powerful Alpha across the room, regardless of logic. Morning arrived, cold and gray, bringing with it the summons to the King's Council. Cassian woke instantly, moving with the quiet, coiled grace of a predator. The silent speed with which he prepared, donning a fresh, black tunic and buckling a heavy, decorative belt that finally reflected his true royal status, was intimidating. He was no longer the anonymous guard. He was the king's twin, a prince, a man of power. He offered me nothing, no gentle greeting, no food, no comfort. Only a command: follow me, keep your head high, and do not speak unless spoken to by the king. You will be asked questions designed to corner you, to make you admit that the claim was coerced or invalid. Deny it all. Every word. You chose me. You stand by that choice, even though it means war. I challenged my own fear, making me reckless. He finally looked at me, his eyes hard as flint. Yes, princess, especially now that it means war. We must present a unified front. If the king's second-in-command shows weakness, chaos will follow. The sheer burden of the situation crashed down on me. I was not just a runaway bride. I was a catalyst for conflict. I quickly dressed in the plainest gown I had, resolving to follow his instructions, if only to mitigate the disaster I had caused. The council chamber was far grander than the ballroom, yet felt suffocating. King Alaric sat at the head of a massive mahogany table, flanked by the High Council of the Midnight Pack, the Eldorian ambassadors, and my father, King Oberon, whose face was a mixture of impotent rage and despair. Alaric didn't mince words. We are here to ratify the royal mate claim, made by Princess Callista upon my brother, Cassian. There are serious political implications, chief among them the annulment of the Eldorio Ironfang alliance and the immediate threat of war from Alpha Theron. The questioning began, led by a stern, aged she-wolf of the Midnight Council named Lady Morwen. Her eyes were sharp, missing nothing. "Princess Callista," Lady Morwen began, her voice crisp and accusatory. "It is known that you were fleeing an unwanted betrothal. Did you not intentionally select a man you believed to be powerless, a foreign guard, in an attempt to simply avoid your duty, knowing that the claim would be easily annulled? It was the precise trap Cassian had warned me about. If I admitted the truth, the claim was voided, and I was back in Theron's grasp." I met Lady Morwen's gaze unflinchingly. "No, Lady Morwen. I saw a man who carried himself with honor, quiet strength, and a demeanor entirely absent of the cruelty I was promised in my intended mate. I chose the kind of man I wished to spend my life with. I made a true choice." Morwen leaned forward. "You did not recognize Prince Cassian, the king's twin, disguised in the simple uniform of a foreign patrol." "I did not," I replied, keeping my voice even. The irony, the utter, devastating irony, was my only shield. I made my choice based on the man's character and presence, not his title. I stand by that choice. Cassian sat silently beside me, a dark, imposing figure who remained completely impassive during my testimony. His quiet presence was a bedrock, an unspoken confirmation of my words that the council seemed to reluctantly accept. But King Alaric was not finished. He leaned back in his high-backed chair, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. His eyes, identical to Cassian's, studied me with a disconcerting intensity. "The claim is sealed by the mark," King Alaric stated, his voice ringing with finality. "It is sacred. However, the King's Council requires proof that this bond is one of mutual assent, Callista. Not just desperate escape on your part, but an intentional acceptance on my brother's. Cassian is a prince, trained from birth to control his alpha instincts. He could have easily refused the claim. Why did he not?" All eyes swung to Cassian. This was the true test, the moment he could easily throw me to the wolves with a single, simple lie. Cassian finally spoke, his deep voice carrying the weight of command. "Your Majesty, I honor the princess's choice because I chose to. The princess claimed me with the intent of a true mating claim, not a simple gesture of defiance. When she kissed me, she invoked a power stronger than any royal decree." He paused, and the air thickened. "As an alpha, my instinct is to protect my pack. When the princess invoked the claim, my primal self recognized the desperation of a female seeking safety. And when Alpha Theron challenged the choice, my instinct was to assert dominance over a rival male who dared challenge my newly claimed mate." He looked at the king. Then, shockingly, he reached out and took my hand. His skin was warm, calloused, and surprisingly gentle. The contact sent the strange, restless ache in my body soaring. "I am a man of duty, brother," Cassian said, his voice dropping slightly, meant only for the inner circle. "I will not start my marriage with a lie. The initial claim was hers. The acceptance was mine. The bond is sealed. The acceptance was mine. He had willingly, intentionally accepted me, not out of love, but out of some cold sense of alpha duty and respect for the law. Yet the pressure he applied to my hand, the sheer heat radiating from his palm, made the logic of his words irrelevant. I was focused only on the primal shift the contact caused within me. The council nodded, satisfied. The claim was ratified. The interrogation lasted for another brutal hour, covering everything from the Iron Fang's expected reaction to my dowry. By the time it was over, I was physically and emotionally drained. King Alaric rose, signaling the end of the session. He fixed Cassian with a grim stare. "You are confined to the North Tower until further notice. You will not leave her side. No public appearances. No private meetings. Your only duty now is the protection of your mate, who is now a political lightning rod." "Understood." "Understood, Your Majesty," Cassian replied, bowing low. As we walked out, the king called out to me, his voice sharp and cold. "Princess Callista, I hope you realize that the life you saved, yours, is now inextricably linked to the potential destruction of 2 kingdoms. Your selfishness has given my brother a new destiny. Do not disappoint him." The words were a brutal end to the day. Once we were back in the confines of the North Tower, Cassian didn't release my hand until we were inside the bolted room. The moment he did, the warmth, the intense sensory overload, vanished, leaving me feeling exposed and cold again. "Well done, princess," he said, the faint praise colder than any insult. "You handled the interrogation flawlessly." "Why did you do that?" I demanded, stepping toward him, fueled by the confusing mix of terror and the growing, primal ache in my chest. "You could have lied. You could have said I was delirious, that you were just fulfilling a guard's duty. You saved me a second time, but you condemned yourself." Cassian walked to the fire, picking up the poker and stirring the coals. The metal scraped against the stone, a harsh, metallic sound. "I told you, Callista," he said, his voice quiet, his back still to me. "I am a man of honor. I respect the claim. More importantly, I respected your desperation. Theron would have been a torment from which there was no return. You bought a chance at a life, however disastrous. I will not be the one to betray the sanctity of our laws to hand you back to that monster." He turned around, his eyes piercing through me. "But know this, the claim is already taking hold. You felt it in the council chamber, didn't you? That pull, that need when I touched you. It will only get stronger. It will twist your mind and your body, making you crave me, whether I am cold or cruel. It is the curse of the Alpha Bond." He took a step closer, and I felt the air grow heavy, charged with his sheer presence. The restless ache in my body intensified, urging me forward, demanding contact. "And Cassian finished, his voice raw, rough with self-control, am fighting the bond with every breath. "I will protect you. I will honor you. But I will not allow your selfish impulsiveness to compromise the emotional detachment I need to survive this political nightmare." He was rejecting the bond, actively warring with the primal instincts that should have been raging inside him. He was a prince sacrificing his heart for duty, even if it meant denying the deepest connection of his life. And I, the selfish princess, was the cause of that devastating choice. Tears sprang to my eyes. "What about me, Cassian?" I whispered, the pain in my chest overwhelming. "I saved my life, only to be bound to a man who refuses to look at me, refuses to touch me, and expects me to live with the constant, agonizing ache of an unfulfilled bond. Is this the freedom you honored?" He didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply turned away, back to the fire, the silence in the room a crushing, final answer. Chapter 4. Days bled into one another, marked only by the growing, agonizing presence of the claim. The North Tower was less of a refuge and more of a testing ground for my sanity. I existed in a state of constant, unbearable contradiction, reviled by the man I was bound to, yet consumed by the instinct to be near him. The emotional detachment Cassian swore to maintain was a devastating success. He treated me with meticulous care, providing food, ensuring the fire was banked, and maintaining the appearance of a watchful mate for the guards outside. But his eyes never held warmth, and his hands never sought mine, save for that single moment in the council chamber. His presence was my only comfort, and yet the source of my deepest torment. The vague, restless ache I had felt initially escalated into a piercing physical and emotional pain. My body felt alien, humming with an energy I couldn't dissipate. Sleep became impossible. Every nerve ending seemed attuned to Cassian's location. When he sat by the fire, I felt a desperate gravitational pull toward the heat of his body. When he walked across the room, the absence of his scent at the door was a profound, nauseating emptiness. The traditional teachings of the mate bond rushed back to me. The claim was meant to be fulfilled rapidly. An alpha's mark signaled the initiation of the bonding fever, a shift meant to drive the pair together, completing the link and stabilizing the female's system. Cassian, by actively suppressing his own instincts and rejecting me physically, was forcing the primal power of the bond to turn inward, weaponizing it against my body. One afternoon, as I was attempting to read by the window, a sharp, searing pain shot through my left arm, radiating from the wrist up to my shoulder. I gasped, dropping the book. "Callista." Cassian's voice, sharp with immediate concern, cut through his usual indifference. He was across the room instantly, kneeling beside me, his hands hovering, not quite touching. My vision blurred. It's my arm. It feels like fire." He grasped my wrist, then, his touch electric. The surge of warmth was so intense it momentarily chased the pain away, replaced by the dizzying rush of his familiar scent. I leaned into him, a pathetic, wounded creature seeking solace. He pulled back immediately, his face rigid, but his emerald eyes scanned my arm intently. "There is nothing there," he stated, his brow furrowed in confusion. "It's not visible," I whispered, clutching his sleeve, terrified he would move away. "It's inside. My bones, they ache. And when you touch me, it stops. The pain stops." He stared at my face, a flicker of genuine shock crossing his features. He understood. This was the bond's desperate attempt to assert itself. "The bonding fever," he murmured, his voice tight. "But it should be radiating from the mark, not your extremities. You are shifting." My heart hammered. "Shifting? I'm human. I'm Eldorian. We don't shift." "You are now mated to a midnight alpha," Cassian countered, his eyes dark with devastating self-reproach. "The bond will not be denied. It is attempting to adapt your physiology to handle the connection, to make you resilient enough to carry my future lineage. Your system is fighting the change, Callista. It believes it is under attack." He stood abruptly, putting a protective, agonizing distance between us. "I will not touch you again unless necessary. The temporary relief you feel from my touch is merely the bond celebrating the contact. It will only make the subsequent rejection more brutal." His words, clinically delivered, were a new kind of cruelty. He was diagnosing my suffering as a scientific phenomenon, refusing to acknowledge the heart behind it. Over the next 2 days, the fever intensified. I couldn't eat. I paced the room relentlessly, driven by the profound, animalistic need to move, to run, to hunt. I found myself staring longingly at the thick, cold window panes, not wishing for escape, but for the feel of the night air, the forest floor, the exhilarating freedom of the wild. One evening, unable to bear the restless agony any longer, I collapsed near the hearth, wrapping my arms around my knees, rocking slowly. Cassian was sitting near me, performing a complicated, intricate cleaning of his hunting knife, a deliberate display of non-engagement. "I can't do this, Cassian." I choked out, the words catching in my dry throat. "I can't live like this. The loneliness, the constant pain. It's breaking me." He didn't stop cleaning the knife, but his movements slowed imperceptibly. "You must endure it," he said, his voice flat. "This pain is the consequence of your impulsive choice. You must be strong enough to bear the political weight of our union and the physical weight of our bond." My choice saved my life. I cried, pushing myself up to face him, the tears finally starting to fall. I would rather die than marry Theron. But you, Cassian, you are torturing me with your honor. You talk of duty, but you are slowly killing the woman who risked everything for a moment of hope. He finally looked up, and the sight of my tears seemed to pierce his carefully constructed barrier. His eyes were wide, and the fierce control in his jaw faltered. "Don't," he whispered, the sound raw. "Don't what?" I challenged, pulling myself to my feet, the pain in my bones irrelevant against the rush of primal need driving me forward. "Don't feel? Don't ask for the basic comfort of a mate when my body is screaming for yours. You claimed me, Cassian. You are an alpha. You swore to protect me." I stumbled toward him, closing the distance, needing to feel that surge of temporary, addictive relief. He was fast. Before I could touch him, he was on his feet, holding the shining, sharp blade of the knife horizontally between us, creating a clear, dangerous barrier. "Stop, Callista," he commanded, his voice a low, warning snarl. His breathing was ragged, his control visibly shattering. His scent, usually subdued, intensified, filling the room with the dizzying, overpowering musk of a deeply distressed alpha. "You don't want me near you, but you can't deny the bond is real." I screamed, my hand outstretched, ignoring the sharp threat of the knife. "This is what you're fighting. Not me, but us." The intensity of my emotions, combined with the power of his distressed alpha scent, was too much. The world tilted. A low, guttural noise ripped from my throat, a noise that was decidedly not human. And the searing pain in my arm returned with brutal force, escalating instantly to a new, terrifying peak. I didn't simply collapse. I hit the floor with a strangled cry, my spine arching. It wasn't just pain, it was a tearing sensation. I felt a horrifying, grinding pressure in my jaw, and the metallic tang of blood filled my mouth as my teeth clenched. Cassian stared down at me, his eyes wide with horror, the knife clattering uselessly to the stone floor. He was no longer fighting the bond. He was witnessing the consequences of his own fatal choice. "No," he breathed, his voice broken. "It shouldn't be this fast. The fever is turning septic. The rejection is destroying you." He moved, but not to comfort me. He knelt down quickly, forcing my jaw open to check my teeth. His hands were shaking violently. He saw the shift, the subtle lengthening and sharpening of my canines, the unmistakable sign of a forced, dangerous transformation. He leaned in, his face etched with agonizing self-reproach, the remnants of his emotional detachment finally shattered by the sight of my suffering. "I was trying to save us from the political consequences," he confessed, his voice rough with despair. "But I have only ensured your death. I cannot let you die here, Callista. Not like this." He did the unthinkable. He pulled me into his arms, crushing me against his massive chest. The world exploded. The pain vanished instantly, replaced by a blinding, transcendent relief. His body was home. His heart was my anchor. He buried his face in my hair, inhaling my scent with a deep, shuddering breath. "Forgive me, my mate," he rasped, his voice raw, stripped of all regal polish. "The bond requires completion. Now, before it consumes you both, I choose you. I choose the chaos. I choose the claim." And with that raw, desperate declaration, he lifted me into his arms, carrying me toward the great cold bed, his self-imposed prison finally yielding to the desperate, terrifying needs of the claim. Chapter 5. The moment Cassian's lips touched mine, the world ceased to be the cold, gray fortress of the North Tower. There was no hesitation now, no icy restraint, only a desperate, primal urgency that eclipsed fear and shattered his wall of duty. The kiss was a collision, fierce, demanding, and utterly consuming. His mouth moved against mine with a rough, devastating hunger, a reflection of the weeks of forced denial. It wasn't a lover's tenderness. It was the alpha claiming what was intrinsically his, fighting the internal damage that his own coldness had inflicted upon his mate. My own body responded with a shocking, instinctive violence. The searing pain that had consumed me minutes before was instantly transmuted into a dizzying, exquisite relief. The claim was finally being answered. He lifted me, his arms a cage of powerful muscle, carrying me the short distance to the bed. I clung to him, inhaling his scent, the deep, intoxicating musk of pine and dominance, which was now laced with the raw, untamed danger of an alpha who had abandoned all pretense of control. As he lowered me onto the soft mattress, he broke the kiss just long enough to look down at me. His emerald eyes were blazing, no longer with cold disdain, but with the terrifying, beautiful fire of possession. "I am sorry, Callista," he murmured, his voice a low, gravelly confession against my ear. "I swore to protect my twin and my kingdom, but the bond is paramount. I choose you. I choose the chaos. Now, take my strength." He shifted, the sound a low, resonant snap of bone and muscle beneath his skin. It wasn't a full, terrifying transformation into his true wolf form, but a rapid, partial shift that only a high-born alpha could achieve in the heat of passion. His teeth lengthened visibly, and his irises glowed with a feral, urgent light. He was no longer Prince Cassian. He was the raw embodiment of the midnight alpha. The sight should have terrified the sheltered Eldorian princess in me, but the fever-ridden, bond-stricken part of me greeted it with an overwhelming wave of recognition and relief. This was the true mate my soul had chosen. He didn't hesitate. He took me quickly, brutally, but with an underlying reverence that spoke to his awareness of my shifting, vulnerable state. It was a joining born of necessity and survival, a desperate act to stop the consuming fever. Every touch, every thrust was a powerful influx of his alpha energy, an aggressive act of healing meant to stabilize my body and complete the permanent sealing of the claim. With each merging of our bodies, I felt the searing pain in my limbs recede. The restless, unbearable ache was replaced by a deep, bone-settling peace. I wasn't just accepting his claim. My body was drinking in his strength, completing the process of my forced transformation. The primal connection between us tightened, an unbreakable rope of emotion, instinct, and belonging. In the moment of culmination, Cassian released a deep, resonant roar, not of pain, but of the sheer devastating satisfaction of the alpha claim. It was a sound that shook the windows and the very foundation of the tower, and in that same instant, something deep within my chest settled, a profound click that signified the end of my resistance and the beginning of my new life as his true mate. We lay entangled for what felt like hours, the heat of the bond radiating between us, warding off the cold of the stone chamber. The silence now was not one of cold indifference, but of spent energy and deep, saturated connection. Cassian's arm was thrown possessively over my waist, his breathing slow and even against the top of my head. His scent was everywhere, a comforting blanket. I was exhausted, but utterly content. The fever was gone. The agony was replaced by a blissful inertia. I was claimed, sealed, and safe. But safety was a fleeting concept in the royal court. A sharp, furious banging on the heavy oak door shattered the silence. "Cassian, open this door. Open it immediately, or I will have the guards break it down." It was King Alaric's voice, sharp and laced with volcanic fury. Cassian stirred instantly, rising to full alert with the seamless transition of a trained soldier. He rose from the bed, ignoring the scattered remnants of our clothes, and strode naked to the door. "Brother," Cassian's voice was deep, steady, and held a new layer of alpha authority that was instantly recognizable. I advise against that. The claim has been sealed. The princess is now my true mate. Breaking down the door would be an affront to the sanctity of the bond. The air outside the door crackled with Alaric's rage. Sanctity? You defy me, and then speak of sanctity? I gave you one order. One, to guard her and keep the situation politically contained. You knew the state of her bond fever. You knew the political fallout of sealing this claim tonight. Theron is already mobilizing his pack. Brother. And you choose now to fulfill your desires. It was not desire, Alaric, Cassian replied, his tone low and resolute. It was survival. The fever was turning. The claim was consuming her. I was forced to stabilize her. My choice was to lose her to the illness caused by my own coldness, or to seal the bond and face the consequences. He paused, and I could hear Alaric's ragged breathing on the other side. The claim is complete. Her physiology is stable. She is now a full midnight pack mate. I chose to save her life. You may punish me as you see fit, but the outcome is permanent. The silence that followed was terrifying. Finally, Alaric spoke, his voice dangerously quiet. Get dressed. Both of you. The entire keep knows. I felt the surge of your claim. Every alpha in the territory felt it. The political landscape just exploded. Cassian. You will join me in the war room in 1 hour. Your mate stays here. Alaric's footsteps retreated, heavy with frustration and fury. Cassian turned back to me. He was breathtaking, powerful, marked by sweat and the raw intensity of the bond, yet now focused entirely on the duty ahead. He walked back to the bed, picking up a heavy fur mantle and draping it gently over me. He ran the back of his hand along my cheek, his touch tender now, completely devoid of the forced coldness. I have to go, he said, his voice rough. I must face the consequences of my choice. I brought this chaos, and I will stand beside my brother and face the war I have guaranteed. Cassian, I whispered, taking his hand, feeling the now familiar, stabilizing heat of the bond. I am yours. I stand by you. Let me come. He shook his head, a firm, sad refusal. No, you are the queen's daughter, and now my mate. You are the most valuable piece on the board. You stay here. You rest. You let the bond settle. I need you safe, Callista. More than I need to win this war. I need you to survive it. He kissed my forehead, a soft, proprietorial kiss, before pulling away and quickly dressing in fresh, dark clothing. Before he left, he went to the heavy chest and pulled out a simple, silver locket on a chain. He fastened it around my neck. What is this? I asked, feeling the cool metal against my skin. The sigil of the Midnight Alpha's mate, he explained. A declaration of ownership, protection, and eternal loyalty. Let no one in this keep, or in this territory, mistake your status. You are mine. Rest, my mate. I will return to you. And with that, he unbolted the door and walked out, leaving me alone in the chaos he had chosen. I felt safe, claimed, and finally whole, but the true battle was just beginning. The choice had been made, but the war for our future was now inevitable. Chapter 6. The silence in the North Tower, following Cassian's departure, felt like the calm before the storm. I lay under the heavy fur mantle, the silver sigil around my neck cool against my skin, a constant, physical reminder of the claim. The fever was gone, replaced by a soothing, deep-seated warmth that radiated from the bond. I was no longer an independent princess. I was the Midnight Alpha's mate, and my entire being was now inextricably linked to Cassian. But that wholeness came at a terrifying price. The bond, now sealed, allowed me to sense Cassian's emotions, a terrifying gift in a moment of crisis. I felt a crushing weight of responsibility, not fear, but a determined resolve, a readiness to face the consequence of the chaos he had chosen. He was in the war room, and I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that the discussion was about Theron's inevitable attack. My thoughts kept returning to the one small, private thing Cassian had confessed. He had fought the bond for political reasons. He sacrificed his heart for duty. Until duty demanded, he sacrificed his freedom for my survival. I couldn't just lie here protected and useless while he faced the war I had started. I rose, my body feeling stronger and lighter than it had in weeks. The subtle shift had changed me. I felt a resilient energy thrumming beneath my skin. I dressed quickly, pulling on the simple but robust clothing Cassian had left for me, a small gesture of acceptance that now felt monumental. I approached the heavy, bolted door, intending to wait for Cassian's return, when a low, urgent sound caught my attention. It was not at the door, but at the window. I moved quietly, peering through the thick, reinforced glass. Below, in the main courtyard of the keep, was a flurry of grim activity. Guards rushed to reinforce the gates. Horses were being saddled, and there, standing rigid and pale among his anxious retainers, was my father, King Oberon. He wasn't addressing his own people. He was speaking with a small, tense contingent of Midnight Pack nobles. I cracked the window just enough to catch the frantic fragments of the conversation, driven by a growing, dreadful intuition. Impossible, Alaric is mad. Oberon hissed, his voice tight with desperation. The alliance with Theron was our only safeguard. Now he has thrown us to the wolves for his brother's reckless arrogance. A tall midnight noble, Lord Gareth, responded coldly. Your daughter invoked the sacred claim, King Oberon. It is binding. And Alpha Theron's immediate mobilization is not merely a threat, it is an act of war against the unified territories, not just your kingdom. But Eldoria will fall first, my father cried, wringing his hands. If Theron breaches the borders, he will target Callista. He will target the royal line. You must give him something to hold him back. Nullify the marriage. Send him a declaration that the bond is void. I will offer him anything, lands, gold, a new bride. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. My own father, still trying to trade me away, even after the claim was sealed. The fear of war was so great that he was willing to desecrate the highest law of our people. King Oberon, you mistake our loyalty. Lord Gareth's voice was stern. King Alaric and Prince Cassian are standing firm. The claim is sealed. The princess is a Midnight Alpha's mate. Any attempt to annul the bond now will be viewed as treachery, and we will protect our own. Our forces are mobilizing to defend your border. Sire, prepare your defenses. The small window to the outside world closed as Lord Gareth turned dismissively and walked away, leaving my father alone, defeated, staring at the cold stone ground. My initial anger at my father quickly gave way to a wave of profound gratitude and fierce loyalty toward the Midnight Pack. They were standing by Cassian, and by extension, standing by me. They were choosing the sanctity of the law and the honor of the claim over political expediency. A sudden, sharp impulse of protectiveness for Cassian, a raw, almost physical need to be near him, gripped me. I couldn't let him face this alone. My heart told me the king was not punishing Cassian. He was preparing him for the battlefield. I unbolted the door, surprisingly easy, and slipped into the deserted, torch-lit hallway. My mission was simple: find the war room. The keep was buzzing with suppressed tension. I moved with a strange, instinctive stealth, the subtle changes in my body lending me an uncanny awareness of my surroundings. I found the war room on the ground floor, guarded by two massive, unmoving alphas. I need to see Prince Cassian, I stated, my voice clear and steady. The silver sigil around my neck was my only passport. One of the guards, a scarred veteran, looked at me with a mix of awe and grim recognition. He glanced at the locket. "The king's orders, princess, are that you are confined to the North Tower." "And my mate's orders," I countered, standing tall, "are that I remain safe, and I will be safer at his side than waiting alone for news of his death. Tell him his mate is here." The guard hesitated, his loyalty warring with his fear of the Alpha King. He must have seen the unshakable determination in my eyes, or perhaps he sensed the deep, newly formed claim, because he finally stepped aside and opened the massive door, just wide enough for me to slip through. The war room was dominated by a huge table covered in maps and flickering lamps. King Alaric, Cassian, and several high-ranking generals stood huddled over the battle plans. Cassian was the first to look up, and the momentary lapse in his control was a devastating thing to witness. His eyes flashed with a potent mix of relief, frustration, and an instant alpha-grade fury at the guard. "Callista, what are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice dropping into a powerful, dangerous tone that usually commanded instant obedience. I walked directly to him, ignoring the stunned gazes of the generals. I stopped inches from his imposing form and placed my hand firmly on his chest, directly over his racing heart. "I am here because you are mine," I stated, my voice strong, driven by the protective instinct of the bond. "And if there is to be a war for my sake, I will stand by the man who chose me over his duty. Do not send me away, Cassian. I want to hear the truth. What is there in doing?" My action, the public display of the sealed claim and my unwavering support, seemed to deflate the tension in the room. It was more than a gesture of affection. It was a political statement. The runaway princess was now the loyal mate, fully accepting her role. King Alaric, watching us intently, gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod to his brother. The fight was gone from him. The choice had been made. Cassian covered my hand with his own, the deep heat of the bond instantly calming the nervous energy running through me. "Theron is not moving on Eldoria," Cassian stated, his voice softening just for me. "He is moving south toward the Whispering Pass. It is the oldest, most sacred route between the Midnight and Eldoria territories. He knows that if he blocks that pass, he can starve both kingdoms into submission. It's a bold, tactical strike designed to force a confrontation on his terms." "Then we must intercept him there," I stated, looking at the map, the strategy suddenly clear. Cassian looked down at me, pride gleaming in his eyes. "We must. The pass is 3 days' ride, but his forces are already underway. We leave at dawn. I am commanding the vanguard. He didn't ask me to leave. He didn't try to send me back. He accepted my presence." Alaric cleared his throat, his gaze steady. "Cassian is right. We attack at dawn. The war for the claim starts tomorrow, princess. Do you understand the sheer magnitude of what that means?" I looked at the Alpha King, then at my mate, the man who had traded his peaceful existence for my life. "Yes, Your Majesty," I replied, gripping Cassian's hand tighter. "It means the man I chose will lead your forces to victory, and I will wait here as his true mate until he returns to me." Cassian squeezed my hand, a silent promise of his return. He had chosen the chaos, and I had chosen him. Our life together, the one born in desperation and sealed in a feverish night, was finally beginning, poised on the knife edge of war. Epilogue. The keep woke with the first gray light of dawn. The air was cold, but the tension was electric. I stood on the North Tower ramparts, the heavy fur mantle wrapped around me, the silver sigil gleaming. Below, the Midnight Pack's vanguard assembled. Hundreds of the fiercest, most disciplined warriors in the territories, led by King Alaric and Prince Cassian. Cassian rode a massive black stallion, his dark uniform now covered by battle armor, making him look less like a prince and more like the inevitable force of nature he truly was. He was the picture of an alpha ready for war. Before they rode out, Cassian looked up. His eyes, emerald beacons of focus and determination, found mine immediately. The distance was great, but the bond bridged it effortlessly. I felt a surge of his love, raw, protective, and undeniable, and I pushed back every ounce of my own hope and strength into the connection. He gave me one brief, authoritative nod, a promise. Then he turned his horse, and the massive force thundered out of the keep, heading toward the Whispering Pass and the war that was now irrevocably ours. I stayed there for a long time, watching until the last glint of steel vanished over the horizon. The future was uncertain, drenched in the fog of war, but my heart was finally settled. I had fled a cold prison only to be claimed by a cold prince, who had ultimately risked everything for my life and his honor. We had both survived the initial chaos. Now, we just had to survive the war. I placed my hand over the silver sigil on my chest, a small smile touching my lips. Thank you for listening to this story. If you felt the tension, the drama, and the emotional connection between Callista and Cassian, please show your support. Like this video, comment with your favorite moment or theory, subscribe for more intense paranormal romances, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the sequel.